Hello, friends. We are now almost a year and a half into this attempted fascist takeover of our American democracy. And I know that many of you, especially organizers and regular protesters, are probably feeling tired and maybe even discouraged after this latest redistricting, gerrymandering fiasco. So I want to take some time out right now and try something a little bit different. I want to offer you all some words of encouragement. And these words come from this book that was recommended to me by a friend and fellow organizer. The book is titled Read This When Things Fall Apart: Letters to Activists in Crisis. And this book will be in Beatnik Books once we open the shop. So I've chosen a chapter that I feel is appropriate for this moment right now. The chapter is titled Read This If You're Losing and Discouraged. And this chapter is written by, and I'm going to do the best I can with some of the names in this chapter. Forgive me if I butcher this, Micah Herskind. And this book is a collection of letters written by organizers to organizers, offering them words of encouragement through difficult times. So this chapter again, called Read This If You're Losing and Discouraged. And the chapter begins, Dear friend, I'm writing to you at the end of 2024. Things feel really horrible. The walls seem to be closing in. The fascist creep, police terror, and imperialist wars that we witness daily are deeply bipartisan ventures, cheered on with a bloodlust from both sides of the aisle. Donald Trump was just elected again, and the outgoing president spent the past year aiding, abetting, and facilitating genocide. Truthfully, things have felt bad for a while. The year 2023 began with the murder of Tortuguita, a queer indigenous Venezuelan forest defender who was living in Atlanta's Weelaunee Forest to protect it against destruction, and the creation of a sprawling police militarization facility known as Cop City. The year ended with a genocidal campaign against Palestinians backed by the full force of the U.S. government. Across these atrocities, mainstream media has served as a megaphone for state and corporate interests, painting victims as aggressors and resistors as terrorists. As people have risen up against environmental devastation, police expansion, and genocide, the state has aggressively deployed the tools of policing, prosecution, and caging in attempts to crush movements and ruin lives. Currently, 61 Stop Cop City activists are facing baseless conspiracy charges under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act. The police across the world have conducted mass arrests of those protesting Israel's genocide of Palestinians. I know you're struggling. I am too. Honestly, I'd be skeptical of anyone who is not struggling in some way right now. And as a relatively young organizer, I cannot say with certainty that things will end up okay. Like me, you've probably chanted, "When we fight, we win." But for as many times as I've repeated this phrase, unfortunately, it's not always true. We fought for a lot of things and suffered lots of demoralizing losses. In this moment, when the defeats feel too discouraging, I cannot tell you that fighting will always lead to a win. But I can tell you about the ways that I have seen people fight for a better world in the face of horrible odds, and why that fight has been worth it every time, even when we've lost. I can tell you why I think it matters that time and again there are people who say no to the status quo and who fight for a different future. I can tell you why I think it's worth it for you to keep fighting despite the despair. I want to tell you about the struggle to stop Cop City, a movement that has fought since early 2021 to stop the destruction of over 380 acres of the Weelaunee Forest, a stretch of land in a majority black area of southeast Atlanta that has been called one of the four lungs of the city. The land is under threat from a powerful coalition of state and corporate actors who publicly released plans in spring of 2021 to destroy the forest and turn it into a massive urban warfare training center for police. There are many stories that could be told about this struggle, stories of the decentralized movement's militant tactics, such as sabotage of construction machinery and courageous land defense, stories of deep relationship building and weekly canvassing to build opposition to the project, stories of mutual aid in the forest and jail vigils for arrested comrades, stories of everyday residents and neighbors coming together to fight for a different future in Atlanta. and those stories all matter. But one of the stories that I find most hopeful in this moment is how the movement has responded to losses. Time and again, the Stop Cop City movement has taught me that what seems like a final loss can often be transformed into a beginning. You never know when you can turn a moment of would-be defeat into another opportunity to fight, a chance to live another day, to keep hope alive, to preserve the possibility of long-term victory. And that alone makes the fight worth it. Through the first summer of the movement, a coalition formed to canvass neighborhoods around the forest and to build public opposition to the plan. Through marches, petition circulation, call-in campaigns, and public comment, Atlanta residents voiced their opposition to the plan. In August 2021, the proposal came before the Atlanta City Council for a final vote. Many thought the plan would pass on that day. I certainly did. But at the last minute, and after significant public comment, the council member closest to the site objected to the plan on the grounds that the Atlanta Police Foundation had not reached out to her at all, compounding mounting accusations that APF's entire process was shrouded in secrecy. The plan was narrowly delayed by a vote of 8-7, a result most had considered unlikely on the morning of the vote. This was just one of many small wins that the movement was able to secure, moments where struggle in the face of unlikely odds nonetheless achieved a minor victory, making the state's repressive work harder and delaying defeat in a way that gave organizers more time to fight. Despite the delay to the project, the City Council nonetheless approved the plan by a 10-4 vote in September 2021. They did so after listening to 17 hours of public comment in which 2/3 of commenters stridently opposed the plan, a fact that would be referenced repeatedly in the following years as the project's anti-democratic nature became even clearer. The approval vote was a major blow to the movement. That September day could have been the movement's end. Indeed, legislative defeats are often moments where coalitions fall apart, where despair sets in, where it seems we've lost and should move on to the next fight. And for many who have been organizing, that summer there was a necessary period of rest and recovery. No one can or should organize endlessly. But while some regrouped, a new tactic emerged as forest defenders took to the Weelaunee Forest to physically defend it against destruction, a tactic that would endure successfully for nearly a year and a half and bring new life and creativity to the movement. In other words, that September vote was the first major moment where what the state had hoped would be a death blow to the movement instead became an early setback within a protracted struggle, a time when the movement transformed a would-be end into a new beginning. A chance to fight again, to become more militant, more passionate, and more equipped to adequately respond to the stakes. Just as importantly, despite the summer ending with a setback, organizers managed to lay many building blocks of what would become an international movement. Local opposition to the project grew. Militant acts of sabotage against companies backing the project quietly began. Activists generated hours of public comment and multiple media scandals. Movement journalists uncovered emails that began to illustrate the depths of collusion between APF, the city's corporations, and city leadership. And the movement peeled off 4 council votes from what would have otherwise likely been unanimous support for the project. None of this was enough to defeat Cop City, but it all mattered, and its ripple effects would be felt for years to come. The resistance continuing in the following years of activists continued to occupy the forest, sabotage construction machinery, and shape the public narrative. As the forest defenders successfully delayed the timeline and heightened the cost of the project, originally projected to be open in spring 2023, the project's construction was, by the end of 2022, almost 2 years behind schedule. The powerful coalition of actors behind Cop City became more desperate, and, as is so often the case, the state's desperation translated to repression. Small armies of police officers gradually increased the frequency and aggression of raids in an attempt to clear out forest defenders and make way for the forest destruction. But repression continued to breed more resistance and more creativity. Activists called for weeks of action targeting corporations behind the project and companies contracted to build Cop City, with activists protesting outside the homes of CEOs while others destroyed construction machinery. Momentum continued to build. On January 18, 2023, what had feared came to pass. After roughly a month of escalating raids, a joint police task force marched into the forest and murdered forest defender Tortuguita in cold blood. Tortuguita, only 26 years old, was by all accounts full of love and determined to contribute to a future without police, prisons, or capitalism. On the same day, police arrested 7 more people and charged them with domestic terrorism. The January raid, too, could have been a moment when the movement ended. The forest was cleared out. The police had made clear that they were willing not only to conduct political assassinations of activists, but to follow those assassinations with smear campaigns, attempting to blame the murdered for their own death. But once again, the people said no. People took to the streets in Atlanta and in cities across the country across the country in a night of rage. In Atlanta, a police cruiser was burned, surveillance cameras were smashed, and the windows of corporate backers of the project were broken. The police responded with more domestic terrorism arrests. But the message was clear: the people would not back down. Once more, a moment that could have been the end instead became another installment in the struggle. Eventually, forest defenders retook the forest. Marches grew. National nonprofits that had lagged in their support and attention for the struggle finally began to take stands. The movement had firmly seized the public narrative, and city leadership realized just how insufficient their propaganda efforts had been thus far. In response, police continued to escalate their repression, including a mass arrest of over 40 people in March 2023 and charges against 23 of them for domestic terrorism, connected to a music festival in the forest, during which a nearby surveillance outpost associated with the construction efforts was burned roughly a mile away. We witnessed these moments in horror, and sometimes despair. We watched as our comrades were kidnapped by police, taken to jail, and charged with outrageous crimes. We watched judges callously deny bond despite a total lack of credible evidence. We saw the city's propaganda machine begin to step up its game, trotting out well-worn outside agitator narratives in attempts to discredit protesters. We saw the deeply bipartisan consensus to criminalize the movement out of existence through state violence. Even still, the movement continued to grow. In June 2023, Atlanta residents shattered previous records for in-person public comment, speaking for hours on end at City Hall against the proposed $67 million in public funding for Cop City. To no one's surprise, the Atlanta City Council ignored their residents, voting shortly after the close of public comments to approve the funding by 11-4. Unlike after the September 2021 vote, this time there was no question as to whether the movement would go on. In fact, there were already multiple plans in motion for new tactics following the June 2023 funding vote. Just 2 days after the vote, a new coalition of organizations announced a new effort, a referendum to put Cop City to a direct vote by Atlanta residents. It was, admittedly, an imperfect tactic. Who would trust the state to oversee a democratic process when the state had already made it clear it would not heed the wishes of its residents? But it was another installment in the struggle, another opportunity to win, or at least to delay defeat. At the same time, others announced another week of action for the end of June 2023, making clear the militant direct action would continue over the summer, and it did. The fight would continue on all fronts. As of this writing, the movement is ongoing, and the situation often feels really bleak. The state always seemed to have an answer for our maneuvers. Nothing that we've done so far has defeated Cop City. We have sustained massive losses and violence. Tortuguita was murdered. 61 people face RICO charges. Many more have been arrested and brutalized by the police. Parts of the forest have been clear-cut. Construction has begun, with claims that Cop City will open within months. City leadership continues to invest further in policing and surveillance. But even as we grieve our losses, we should take stock of our wins. not in a way that lets us off the hook for the work of liberation or that provides hollow comfort, but for the ways in which we've won the chance to fight another day. The power that we've built, the consciousness that we've raised, the people we've radicalized, the narratives we've shaped, the 116,000 signatures we gathered to force a vote on Cop City, the contractors we've forced to pull out of the project, the money laundering charges we've forced the Attorney General to drop, the headaches we've caused for powerful people, the relationships we've built, the moments we've bounced back, the solidarity we've cultivated, the scandals we've exposed, the power dynamics we've laid bare, the times we've managed to lose a battle in a way that better sets us up to win the war, the tactics we've used to move ourselves a little closer to victory than we were before. We can also look to past struggles that have ended in what we might call defeat and understand how they nonetheless laid the groundwork for future fights. While the #NoCopAcademy campaign in Chicago did not manage to defeat the Cop Academy proposal, Stop Cop City organizers capitalized on lessons learned by No Cop Academy organizers as our movement began. Similarly, the Stop Cop City struggle had already fertilized the soil for struggles against proposed cop cities in other states. And organizers are now actively building campaigns in Charlotte, New York City, Baltimore, and elsewhere. Perhaps no one better demonstrates the power of struggle in the face of loss than Belkis Turan, Tortuguita's mother. Since losing her child, Belkis has become the mother of the movement, frequently sharing that while she lost Tortuguita, she gained hundreds of children who are fighting to stop Cop City. As Belkis told a crowd one day, even amid the losses and devastation, we are ultimately fighting for life. Stop Cop City is a project for life. We're all together in this project of life. We are not terrorists. We are not bad people. We want the best for the children in the future. We have to think of the children of our grandchildren because the earth is becoming an unlivable place. So we have to stop Cop City because they are doing wrong and the police are evil. As Belkis, someone who suffered the immeasurable loss of her child, put so clearly, in the face of devastation, we can always recommit to the project of life. None of this changes what I expressed in the opening words of this letter. Things feel really horrible. But even as you take in the horror around you, I hope you will be able to remember and to remind me and to remind others that we are all we have, that we are reason enough to keep fighting, even or especially when things are unimaginably awful, that fighting doesn't guarantee that we'll win, but that it gives us a chance of winning. That it's worth it to keep fighting even in the face of massive loss, and that even when we lose, we can turn moments of defeat into new opportunities to fight. At whatever the end is, whether it's the end of my life or the apocalyptic end of the world, I want to be able to say that I fought until the end, and I hope you will too. In love and solidarity, Micah. And there's a very short bio that I'll read to close this out. Micah Herskind is an organizer, writer, and law student. He is a co-editor of No Cop City, No Cop World, Lessons from the Movement, and has organized in movements to stop Cop City and close the Atlanta City Jail. I hope that gave you some encouragement, friends. You know, times are bleak. It's easy to get down, especially with the barrage from the media. But like that chapter said, we have each other. We are all we have. No one is coming to save us. And as long as we stick together, in the end, we will emerge victorious. Good night, take care, and I'll see you at the next protest.